Sets it a little bit to the left. 11 yards shy of the record. Williams breaks the hole. Williams had a record book. Ricky Williams runs to the Hall of Fame. Touchdown. Ricky Williams, touchdown.
Young from the shotgun. Back to throw. Vince looks. Under pressure. He'll tuck it in run. Vince to the 5. Young. Touchdown Texas. Touchdown Vince Young. He's done it again. Vince Young has given the Longhorns the lead with 19 seconds to play in the game.
Longhorn Nation, we're back.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. My name is Matt Galatzan and I will be your host. And today I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and colleague over at Texas Longhorns On SI, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, how you doing?
Pretty good. Some things happening as of late in the Texas news sphere. So going to cover some of those things and let's do it.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to go over a new basketball commit for the Longhorns that they got last week. Some injury updates there as well. A bizarre Arch Manning take that neither of us really understand. Todd McShay also did a scouting report on Arch Manning, so that'll be a good thing to hit right after that. And then if we have some time, we'll also get into some Texas Longhorns recruiting news as well. But let's start with the basketball commit last week. The Longhorns land another 7-footer. It was a position that, Texas kind of needed to fill after the loss of Jamie Vinson. But they get a commitment from Louis Obiora. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's my bad. Zach may have a better.
I think it's Obiora.
Obiora. Okay. The 7'1", 19-year-old out of England. So, Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about this guy, how he fits into the roster and the plans going forward, and what this means for the Longhorns?
Yeah, well, we kind of knew that Sean Miller was going to be targeting international guys. He hadn't really quite done that, right away after taking the job. We saw how he had there was reports he was interested, and Texas was interested in LSE Asui, an Italian forward who's 19 years old, and then a French guard, Evan Boisder, I think is how you pronounce it. Those two guys were names that had popped up in the international sphere for Texas, but no developments on those two really. So this one with Obiora kind of came out of nowhere. With Jonathan Gaboni from ESPN reporting at first that he had committed to Texas. 7'1", 19 years old, 7'5" wingspan, just absolutely huge. Don't expect him to be playing a lot probably next year. I've watched some tape on him just really briefly, and, his size is obviously very, very noticeable, but still moves a little bit slower, still super raw, has lots of development to go. I think in the long term, he'll probably be in Austin for a few years and keep developing under Sean Miller and that coaching staff, which is a whole new coaching staff. So they obviously see something in him long term. Maybe redshirt is an option for him. Maybe he'll play like a game or two, but don't want to burn that red shirt. I forgot how the rules work for basketball. I know for football, it's like 3 games or 4 games or something, then your red shirt's burned. For basketball, maybe he'll see some action in some of these non-con games that Texas will probably win by like 50 points. But other than that, probably not going to see too much playing time. But, we just saw Jamie Vinson transfer to Texas A&M. He was a 7'1" guy, or like 6'10" guy that, was kind of like a, developmental piece. And so he leaves, and now they bring another 7-footer kind of in the same sort of realm as Jamie Vinson. So, I think interesting commit there. I think it's probably one of the final roster moves they'll make this offseason. I need to look at the numbers again, but I don't think they have I think maybe they have one more scholarship guy, or maybe I don't know if this is the last one. I need to check that. But the roster's pretty much filled out. Got the 5 transfers, got the 4 returners. You got the freshman with John Clark, and then I got a freshman with Obiora. So I think that's 5 plus 4. That's 9 plus that's 11 players. So looking pretty good so far for Sean Miller, and I think it'll be a solid team next year, but we'll see how it all comes together.
Yeah, and I was just looking up the rule while you were talking about that. Apparently, in college basketball, you cannot play a single game still in redshirt. Matt Painter was complaining about that last year, the Purdue head coach.
Mm-hmm.
In college football, it is 4 games you can play,
Right.
and still redshirt. Basketball has not changed that rule yet, but I assume they'll eventually do that.
Yeah.
If he is going to redshirt, he won't play next year, but he'll still be practicing with the team. He'll still be running
Right.
team and in drills and things like that. So, obviously, the physical tools are something to look at for this guy. 7'1", 7'5" wingspan. That's something that they haven't had in a while. That now they have 2 7-footers on the roster, which is, I can't remember how far you have to go back to find that for Texas basketball. It seems like it's been a minute, but Zach, what's this guy's skill set like? How does he fit into what they're trying to do? What are his strengths? Obviously, you said he's a little bit raw, and what are some of the weaknesses you think that he needs to work on in this game?
Yeah, my knowledge about him is still pretty simple, just based off brief, views of what he can do. But I think some of his weaknesses are probably going to be obviously on the perimeter against smaller guards. He's not quite as quick as a 7-footer like Victor Wembanyama is, but who really is, So I think he's a little bit slower there. He's probably going to need to improve his defense, but I think rebounding, rim protecting, those kind of things. I'm not quite sure how he is when it comes to the outside game. I'll have to look at that a little bit more, but it's more just moving the feet quicker, being quicker on your second jump when you're down low. That can be important. But I think they see him as a long-term, true maybe 5 with stretch 4 potential. But yeah, still a long way to go for him. I think once it's been a few seasons and he gets used to college practices and college conditioning, I think that Texas fans will be able to see him have a role. So you never know how things go. Sometimes these players sometimes they come to develop, but then an opportunity opens up in the transfer portal, and then they take another opportunity elsewhere. So you never know how these things go. Sometimes it's kind of a myth that players develop with college basketball programs nowadays, but hopefully Sean Miller can develop a culture of roster retention and development, because he's talked about it from his opening press conference that he wants to develop these guys and get them to the NBA. So still remains to be seen how Obiora will pan out, but I think his skill set and his size is promising for sure, but still a lot of unknowns with him. Again, the competition, and he's playing in England, no disrespect to them. Any professional British guy could definitely cross me up and posterize me, but let's be real. English basketball players are not quite at the level as even the college basketball players in America. So I think the competition that he was going up against is definitely worth noting when it comes to how it compares like the SEC. So we'll see how it goes, but I think if he can remain on campus for at least a few more years, he'll be able to eventually get some playing time, and if he doesn't elect to transfer at some point.
Yeah, and he obviously an English player is not exactly one that's coming from Spain or Croatia or one of those Eastern European countries, Italy. Those guys are facing a little bit heavier competition and a little bit more polished typically when they get to the U.S., but still worth noting. Athletically, having a 7'1" guy with a 7-foot wingspan or 7'5" wingspan is never a bad thing. So we'll see how he develops going forward. We also got some Texas basketball injury news. And Texas got 5 additions in the NCAA transfer portal this offseason. And one of the more notable names was Lucina Traore, who comes over from Xavier, follows Sean Miller. Didn't play last year due to, I believe it was an ACL injury. Is that correct, Zach?
Yeah.
And he, we got an update on him. Zach, why don't you give us the update there? It's a positive one for the Longhorns.
Yeah. So John Rothstein, a very trusted college basketball reporter, I believe he had a conversation with Sean Miller, and Sean Miller told him that Lucina Traore is expected to be cleared for most basketball activities by June, so next month. I forgot which month it was in that he suffered the ACL tear. I believe it was like October, like right before the season began. So just super crushing last year for Sean Miller and that Xavier team. But you still saw how solid they were. Obviously beating Texas in the first four, even without Traore, and he was going to be their like leading rebounder, top big guy. So that was a big loss for him. So, or for them last season. So, but Sean Miller last year, whenever Traore got hurt, Sean Miller said Lucina was a starter on this year's team. He emerged to be our team's best rebounder, low post defender, and shot blocker. He was superior. He was in superior condition and became a tone setter for everything that impacts winning. I mean, that is some really high praise from Sean Miller. So I think Texas fans should get really excited about Traore. You get really scared about the re-injury when it comes to these ACLs. So, hoping for the best for him. But if he's healthy and Texas is healthy around him, unlike they kind of were last season with some of the injuries, I think it's going to be a really solid team next season. Not going to say they're going to be elite or anything, but I think it's really solid. Middle of the pack SEC standings is a realistic thing for them. But yeah, you just hear that praise that Sean Miller had for Traore last season. That just shows how coveted he was once he became re-available in the portal. So yeah, I think from the moment that Sean Miller got the job, I think Traore was probably at the top of his list. And they got him, so he fills a big need that Texas struggled with last season when it came to the rebounding. So I think he's going to be a big addition, and along with Voki Titus, the FAU center, the other 7-foot guy. So, but yeah, really positive development there on the injury front. And like I said, Texas just needs to stay healthy because last season injuries kind of prevented them from being consistent until the very end of the season. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. And I think Traore is going to be big for them.
Yeah, I mean, last season we obviously saw Caden Shedrick was a little bit overwhelmed down there trying to do everything in the post. There wasn't really much behind him in terms of depth. And the rebounding and the rim protection for Texas just wasn't there. Now you bring in Traore. Now you bring in Voki Titus. You still got Nick Cody. Dalen Swain can play some 4. Camden Heide can play some 4. They'll stretch the 4 a little bit more and play on the wing some too. But now you got 2 legitimate guys down there that you can put up against some of these matchups that they'll come across in regular season play and in potentially in the NCAA tournament with teams that run 2 big guys. Like Michigan was a team like that last year. Texas didn't come across them, but Auburn's was another one. Just all these teams have these big guys that were really hammering Texas. Tennessee was another one. So having a couple guys you can throw up there and bang around with those guys and have some legitimate rebounding and rim protection and not stretching those guys too thin is going to be a real big thing for the Longhorns going forward. Let's switch gears. We're going to talk a little college football now. We're going to specifically Arch Manning, which is going to be a big topic, I think, for us throughout the offseason, obviously, as is for everyone. But we'll start with the more puzzling story that came out yesterday. Arch Manning is widely considered to be one of the top quarterbacks in college football next season. There's obviously been talk about him being a potential number 1 draft pick, even though the general consensus is that he's going to return to Texas in 2026 and wait another year before going to the NFL draft. Obviously, those things could change. But the general consensus is that Arch Manning will be an elite quarterback and a star with the Texas Longhorns by the time it's all said and done. And then one analyst comes out and completely turns that narrative on his head and slams Arch Manning. Aaron Murray, former Georgia quarterback, he spent a brief time in the NFL, but was a star at Georgia. He's, I believe, the leading passer in Georgia history. That's over guys like Matthew Stafford and Carson Beck and players like that. But he comes out yesterday and not only slams Arch Manning, but also slams Quinn Ewers in the same statement. And I'm going to read you exactly what he said here, and then we'll get into it a little bit. Murray says, "I'm not sold like so many other people are that Arch Manning is going to be a number one pick in the NFL draft. That he's just going to be unbelievable, that he's going to be the next coming of Peyton and Eli, but that's mobile." And I said this last year during the season too, because I was a big fan of Quinn Ewers heading into the season. I thought Quinn did some good stuff at times last season, but let's be honest, Texas probably has the second or third best roster in America, probably the second or third. Why were they not competing for a national championship? Spoiler alert, they did compete for a national championship. I don't know if you saw that, but they were in a college football playoff semifinal and nearly went to overtime with the eventual national champions if it wasn't for an unfortunate play call there at the end. But he goes on to say, because Quinn was holding them back. Quinn did not perform to the level that I thought he could. And then you see now in the NFL draft, I mean, he gets drafted in the 7th round. So every NFL scout, or so even NFL scouts are saying, like, this guy's maybe just not as good as anticipated coming out as a recruiter, maybe even 2 years ago. He says, so all in all, Quinn has a disappointing season, and it reflected in his draft stock. If you are so good and everyone has you projected as the number one pick in the draft come 2026, why in the hell are you not playing above a 7th round quarterback? If Steve Sarkisian knows what he's doing and he knows how good the roster is, which I've talked a lot of coaches about and a lot of different teams, I asked them, what are the top rosters? Ohio State, Texas, probably Georgia. What was holding them back? Quinn Ewers. Why was Arch not playing? It rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And then you watch the tape, and it looks good at times. I wouldn't say it looks incredible. It doesn't scream first-round talent to me off the back. He's talking about Arch now, and I'm not saying he can't get there. I'm never going to talk bad about a quarterback because I know how difficult it is. I'm cheering for him like I cheer for your other quarterback. I want them all to have success, but I need to see it first. I'm not going to crown you this All-American superstar. I went on a really long rant yesterday on my show, Open Gym, on Texas Sports Unfiltered. We run from 4 to 6 Monday through Friday on YouTube and a few other places, so you guys should go check that out. But I lost my cool on this one, Zach. I talked for a good 10 or 15 minutes about how I thought this was an absolutely trash take. How I believe that it was more hot take media than anything else. It doesn't seem like Aaron Murray did his due diligence when giving this take. With the Quinn stuff, obviously, could Quinn have played better last year? Absolutely. But there was a big issue with Quinn. He had a torn oblique, and that was kind of holding him back. But he fought through it. He toughed it out. He still threw for over 3,500 yards or close to it. Got the Longhorns to the college football playoff semifinal, got them to an SEC championship game, threw for 350 yards in that SEC championship game, put them in position to win, and the running game was just not there for them, which is a big reason they lost. Obviously, Burt Auburn missing a couple field goals, also a reason they lost. And then he goes into the college football playoff, wills them to a win over Arizona State with that 4th and 13 touchdown pass to Matthew Golden, and then to Gunnar Helm in the next overtime period to win that game. I thought he played very well against Ohio State for the most part. He hit a lot of throws there. There were some drops, but at the end of the day, the running game wasn't there. Texas scores 14 points in that game, both from touchdown passes from Quinn Ewers. There's a drop from Matthew Golden in the end zone. The play that decided that for them was not on Quinn Ewers. That was a running play that was called by Steve Sarkisian that was questionable, and it just didn't work out. So all in all, Quinn has a phenomenal season. You saw what he could do when he was healthy. He against Michigan early in the season when he was at his full strength before he got injured in that game, he was piecing them up, and I don't really see what he was seeing. Obviously, the NFL draft stuff is there, but as we talked about already multiple times, that had more to do with the NFL than it did with Quinn Ewers. There was talk about how they didn't want a big name as their backup quarterback for most of these teams. Regardless, Quinn was far from the thing that was holding the Longhorns back last season. And, that part of the take alone is questionable. There's a conversation to be had about, having questions about Arch, and it's legitimate, given the fact that he doesn't really have a whole lot of experience out there, and he needs to go out there and prove it. But if you do turn on the tape, which Aaron Murray said he did, specifically if you turn on the tape against UTSA when he played 3/4 of that game, you turn on the tape in his 2 starts against ULM and Mississippi State, you begin to see that there's 10, 15, 20 plays in there that absolutely scream NFL talent, absolutely scream number 1 draft pick, whether it's his arm, whether it's his ability to throw the ball downfield, whether it's his ability to fit the ball into tight windows. He's making NFL throws all over the place in all 3 of those games. And the reason that, and this is another thing, like the reason that he's not starting over a quote unquote 7th round draft pick is because that 7th round draft pick, he was coming off a season in which he led the Longhorns to a Big 12 title, set a passing record in that Big 12 title game, got them 1 play away from the national championship in college football playoff. In the history of college football, I can't remember a time when a quarterback who is that talented and has those credentials already on the wall has been just benched because a redshirt freshman 5-star recruit is on the roster. It's never happened to my knowledge. If it has, somebody can please tell me, but I've never seen it. I don't think it's happened. Anyway, that's the Cliff's notes of what I said yesterday. I went a little bit longer on that one, but Zach, I want to get your thoughts on this. My thoughts are pretty well documented at this point, but what are your opinions of Murray's take here?
Yeah. I do think that he's right to have his opinion. At the same time, I think he's probably saying all these things knowing it's going to get a reaction, and it worked. So congrats to Aaron Murray for succeeding there. But, I think it's okay to have some doubts about Arch Manning. Perfectly fine. He hasn't played a lot, and I can understand that. I disagree with it. But the thing that I just don't understand when it comes to his whole opinion is that he's basically dogging Arch Manning for not being able to pass up Quinn Ewers on the depth chart when Steve Sarkisian pretty much made it clear that Quinn's the starter. He never made any sort of quarterback competition last season. There was never any sort of chance that Arch Manning was going to be able to get the start over Quinn once Ewers was healthy. Steve Sarkisian made that very clear. So I think Aaron Murray is just a little bit misinformed there. It doesn't say anything about Arch Manning's ability that he wasn't able to pass up Quinn Ewers, because that was never going to be a possibility. Quinn was the starter. Sark made that very clear. So it was just a little bit silly there. That was the one part I really disagreed with. He can have his doubts about Arch Manning. That's perfectly fine. But, like you said, when you watch the tape, Arch Manning looks like a future NFL quarterback. When you look at what he did, granted, he did play the worst SEC team in one of his starts. He also played ULM. He played UTSA. You want to see him, play against some high level competition, and he obviously will do that in the season opener against Ohio State. But yeah, there's definitely room for some doubts, but some of them are not warranted at all. Yeah, Arch, like Quinn, was not perfect at all during his time on the field last season. We obviously saw that interception he had against ULM, threw it into three triple coverage. Was not a good throw at all. Probably one of his worst plays of the season. But then he has a beautiful dime at the end of the half to DeAndre Moore against Mississippi State the week after that. Obviously had some really nice downfield throws against UTSA once he took over for Quinn. So the potential was all there. But Arch was he just wasn't ready last season to start a full year like Quinn was. Quinn was a more experienced guy. Obviously they have different skill sets. Of course, Arch is going to be able to bring something different than Quinn would bring. That's just the reality of their skill sets, but doesn't mean anything he's going to bring would be better. Because Quinn was the more experienced guy. He was in bigger moments. He's been in bigger moments. And I saw someone make a really good point about the 4th and 13 play. I don't think Arch Manning recognizes that blitz and calls for extra protection on that play. I just don't. Arch is a great quarterback. It's possible that his lack of experience in that moment probably would not have resulted in a touchdown there. Sure, he can put great touch on the ball. He can recognize the defense. He's an intelligent, sharp guy. But just the lack of experience there, you can argue that he may have not seen that blitz coming from Arizona State, even though they were pressing up with that line pretty quickly. But Quinn recognized it super quick. He knew exactly what he needed to do. He was so calm and cool under pressure. And I think Arch has a lot of those qualities too. But it's just simply the lack of experience. You just can't teach experience at all. And Quinn was never going to give up the starting job to Arch. It was never going to be a thing. The plan all along was for Arch to be behind Quinn this past season. And you even saw the one moment where Arch did come in for Quinn against Georgia. He didn't play too great. Quinn wasn't doing too great either. Let's be real. But Arch gets thrown to the fire against Georgia, and in that second half, I believe he played some. I may be wrong. I don't think he played in the second half, but he definitely played at the end of that first half for Quinn. And Quinn even came out and admitted that it sucked to get benched. Nothing personal against Arch, but it definitely sucked as a competitor. And then from that point on, Sark rode with Quinn the rest of the way. He kind of used that moment, benching Quinn against Georgia, as a motivational piece. And then from then on, Texas didn't lose any games until the SEC championship, and then again in the college football playoffs. So, when your quarterback is leading you to a national champion, to a game away from a national championship in back-to-back years, clearly he is not the weak link of the team. And that's the thing. There wasn't really many weak links on Texas this past season. So I think people are just trying to find a reason or someone to look at, to point fingers at. And Quinn was normally that scapegoat whenever Texas would lose. But in reality, Texas just ran into a historically great Ohio State team that no one was going to stop. So it had nothing to do with any weak links on the team. So I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but you know what I'm saying? I just don't think that I don't think that dogging Quinn and dogging Arch is the way to go here. Aaron Murray is a former quarterback. He knows more than both you and I do combined when it comes to playing quarterback at a high level. Let's be real about that. But I think, like you said, he probably understands he's delivering a hot take that's going to get a reaction, and well, it worked. So, but yeah, I just think that it all boils down to the fact that Steve Sarkisian made it clear that Quinn was the starter. Arch wasn't going to be passing him up. It has nothing to do with Arch's skill set or anything like that. Just a silly take overall when it comes to that point specifically. But yeah, I could go on and on about this. For anyone that listens to the show, we obviously are a Quinn Ewers, a pro Quinn Ewers show. So always going to defend him, but always going to defend Arch as well. You're never going to pinpoint the two against each other. Obviously, speaking with both of them, during media availabilities throughout the season last year, both great guys, carried themselves well, great leaders. Both different guys, of course, as well. So, it's going to be different next year with Arch at quarterback, but I just don't think he was ready last season to be the starter. I don't know if Texas has the record they do or goes as far as they do if Arch is a quarterback. We just don't know. People like to play the hypothetical game. But the fact of the matter is that Quinn Ewers, not many quarterbacks are going to be leading their team to back-to-back CFP semifinals. So Quinn Ewers has it under his belt, and I don't think it's right to throw any sort of unnecessary criticisms at him when it comes to that regard. So Aaron Murray maybe need to get checked for a few of those lingering concussions.
Yeah, potentially. And there's another thing that I want to bring up here too. Based on this logic, you're the number one recruit in the country. You're going to be a top NFL draft pick. You're this, you're that. You're all everybody is talking about going into the offseason. This isn't the first time Texas has faced that situation. If everybody remembers a guy named Vince Young. Vince Young came into Texas, was the number one recruit in the country, number one quarterback, number one everything, most coveted recruit in college football that season. He comes in, and he doesn't start immediately. He splits time with a guy named Chance Mock, who was not an NFL draft pick, to my knowledge. I mean, he definitely would have been, if he was, it would have been a very late round pick. I don't believe he got drafted, though. And that's not a knock against Chance Mock. He was a very highly recruited guy coming out himself, and he was a very talented quarterback. But he was not Quinn Ewers, and Vince Young was the guy that everybody wanted, and he was the arch of that time. In fact, Vince Young comes out his freshman year. He plays all 12 games, but he only throws 143 passes, throws 6 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. In 2004, he continues to struggle at times. He even got, by the way, Vince Young even gets benched in 2003 after he had taken over as the starter in the bowl game against Washington State. Nearly left the program because of it. If it was not for Steve McNair, Vince Young may have left Texas and gone somewhere else, and that's before the transfer portal. That's how bad things were after that game in Vince Young's head. He gets convinced to come back. 2004, he's the full-time starter. Still not a terrific passer by any means. He throws 250 passes, completes 59%, under 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. It wasn't until the Michigan game and later on in that season where he really blew up and established himself as a legitimate passing threat. Next season, obviously, he comes out, has a tremendous year throwing the football, tremendous year running the football, ends up being a super high NFL draft pick. But the point I'm trying to make here is even the best quarterbacks, the most highly rated quarterbacks in college football need time to develop. And slamming a guy because he wasn't quite there yet, despite all the physical tools and traits that he has, is just kind of an asinine take to me. I mean, you could go on. There's multiple guys who this sort of logic applies to throughout the years. Tim Tebow wasn't a starter at Florida before, from a true freshman. I don't believe Chris Leak was there and led them to a national title, and Cam Newton, who was a number one NFL draft pick, did not start over Tim Tebow. And there's multiple other examples of this throughout college football history. So it's just kind of a laughable take to me. I mean, you can make all the criticisms of Arch you want. You can make all the criticisms of Quinn Ewers that you want, but at the end of the day, the tape is there. The production is there for Quinn. The tape is there for Arch. And if you really look at it, it's very easy to see. Which brings me to our next sort of talking point here is somebody who really evaluates quarterbacks and is one of the most renowned NFL draft experts out there, Todd McShay. He has a little bit different of a take than Aaron Murray does. He put out his scouting report of Arch Manning and looked at all the plays that the 70 plays that PFF categorized as key plays from Arch Manning last season. And he basically came out and said that he agreed with all of the hype. He says, we still need to see how Arch Manning fares against top-level competition in the SEC. The game looked fast for him against Georgia in the regular season, but I really like what I've seen on balance thus far. He says, let me pull up the other quote here. He says, I'm not going to bury the lead. Based on Arch Manning's 2024 tape and assuming he continues to develop at the pace he has to this point, I wouldn't hesitate to make him my early number one pick in the 2026 class. He is that gifted and has shown immense potential in limited playing time he's had throughout his first 2 seasons at Texas. This guy has it all talent-wise. I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson as a runner or has Josh Allen's arm, but Arch is tooled up. His combination of prototypical size, mobility, and excellent release and his natural accuracy, it's all there for him to be a great player. The ball snaps off his hand, and he's both slippery and strong in the pocket, showing the ability to extend passing plays and break away from defenders in the open field as a runner. In that small sample, I saw a young player who was learning from his failures, progressing quickly, and loosening his grip on needing to be perfect. The more he played, the fewer negative notes I had, and the more impressed I was at his ability to avoid the same mistake twice. That points to a guy who is hungry and coachable. Factor in his combination of raw talent, family background, elite quarterback coaching in the form of Steve Sarkisian, and Arch is in a good position in as good of a position to succeed in as any quarterback prospect in recent memory. So a little bit different side of the spectrum there for Todd McShay. I obviously lean a little bit more toward his take in this matter. He doesn't get to where he is based on, being wrong very often. There's a reason he's one of the foremost NFL draft experts out there. There's a reason that people trust what he says. So I mean, we're not going to go too much longer on this one, Zach, but I mean, you agree with McShay over Murray here, right?
Yeah, I just think that, if somehow, some way, Arch Manning ends up being a bust in the NFL, there's no proof as to that potentially happening down the line. So just based off what we see now from him, there's no way that you can't think he's going to have some sort of success in the NFL. Obviously, we never know how things go down the line, but as we know Arch Manning now, there's no reason to think that he can't be successful in the NFL. So Aaron Murray's take about him not being super high on Arch Manning is a little bit maybe just guessing about what could happen and hoping he'll be right, but I just don't see it. Kind of going back to Aaron Murray's thing a little bit again, if Arch Manning had started over Quinn Ewers instead last season and proved that he was a better starter somehow, if he had started, Texas fans are still going to find a reason to complain no matter what. They complain that Arch Manning didn't start over Quinn when Quinn had some of his struggles. Okay, but then if Arch Manning had started and he struggled and shows his inexperience, then Texas fans are going to complain, oh, why don't we play the more experienced guy over him? There's no winning, in my opinion, when it came to that whole situation. So I think the way that Texas and Steve Sarkisian handled it was perfect. So I just think that, kind of going back to that point, I just wanted to touch on that really quick. But I think Todd McShay, great analysis from him. I think that he makes a good point. Yeah, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Josh Allen. Those guys are MVP caliber players. Both have won MVPs. But yeah, he's got a little bit of everything that you want out of your quarterback. He's not limited with his legs. He's got a good arm. He's not the best at any one thing, but he offers a little bit of everything that you need. And you add on top of that he carries himself well. He's a great leader. He's loved by his teammates. And you just see him. He's a relaxed guy. He's not too uptight about stuff, but he still is very serious as well. There's a great balance with him. And so all the skills that you see on the field, it's arguably just as important as what he brings off the field, because when you're a guy like Arch Manning with that kind of name, with the kind of position he plays, you need to be having some great intangibles. And so there's just no reason to think that he won't be successful in the NFL. Like I said, anyone that is saying he'll be a bust at some point is probably just guessing and hoping they'll be right, because there's no real proof to say that he'll be a bust, in my opinion. So I like Todd McShay's analysis there. And I think he has some good word choices for sure. Slippery is one I liked when it comes to Arch Manning, being able to evade defenders, just big tree trunks for thighs. You hear that term get thrown around a lot with him. So I think that one's a little bit more accurate. Interesting that it comes from Todd McShay, but then the actual former quarterback has something that's way offline, in my opinion. So interesting to hear both of those.
Yeah, and Todd McShay did play quarterback also, so he's got a little bit of knowledge on how that game works too. Not at a level of Georgia or Texas, right, but he did play the position, so he knows a thing or two, in my opinion. So we're gonna go with McShay on this one over Murray. No disrespect to Murray. I think he's a overall very smart guy. He knows how to play quarterback. Yeah. He did it at a very high level, but in this particular case, I think he needs to go back and revisit that take there. Let's close the show out with a couple recruiting notes real quick. The first one that I wanted to bring up is USC had a major decommitment last week with Xavier Griffin, one of a 5-star linebacker. He decommitted on May 14th from the Trojans, and after his decommitment, he set 4 official visits: Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, and Florida State. He's going to head to Austin on June 13th. And according to On3's Steve Wiltfong, Texas is the biggest threat of the group to land Xavier Griffin. Griffin is a position of major need for the Longhorns. Obviously, with Anthony Hill, entering what is probably his last season with the Longhorns, you would love to get a big time, 5-star recruit to replace him there. Murray is a 6'3", 205-pound linebacker out of Gainesville, Georgia, an absolute hotbed for talent in Georgia there. Gainesville is just one of the many programs in Georgia that produces extremely talented football players. On3's industry ranking has him ranked as the number 28 overall recruit, the number 2 linebacker, and the number 3 player in Georgia. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 8 overall player in the country, the number 1 linebacker, and the number 1 player in Georgia. Obviously, that would be a huge get for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. He's going to visit next month. Zach, what are your opinions here on this news?
Yeah, really big. Obviously, Texas has really been, the 2026 class has some talent for sure, but just as of late, they've really ramped things up, added some really interesting pieces, really talented pieces. So adding Griffin to the mix, he'd arguably become the top commit for 2026 for Texas right away, should he choose the Longhorns. So obviously the 4 official visits, as you mentioned, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Florida State. Texas has obviously shown no problem competing with the other big boys. Texas is one of the big boys. I don't think there should be any sort of concern about the schools they're going up against in that recruiting battle. So it all depends on how his visit goes next month. But yeah, as you mentioned, Anthony Hill likely departing next season. As he should. I think he's already established himself as an NFL linebacker, and one more season ought to do that for him and solidify himself as a first-round pick. So adding in Griffin right away, he could probably start as a freshman like Anthony Hill did. That'll be pretty exciting to see him alongside like Ty Anthony Smith, Leon Villafau, those guys. So, but yeah, I think this would be huge. Not to mention being able to get him after USC lost him is another Texas jab at USC. Don't mind to see that either. But yeah, I think it definitely interesting to see how the recruiting sites rank him a little bit differently. I know you said On3 had him at maybe number 20-ish overall player, but 24/7, 28. Yeah, 24/7 Sports a lot more higher on him. I mean, number 1 linebacker in the class, number 8 overall. That's pretty high praise right there. So, if you're to join the class, adding him alongside the 5-star athlete Jermaine Bishop Jr. plays a little bit of corner, a little bit receiver. That's a really exciting class to start off with Jermaine Bishop and potentially Xavier Griffin if you're able to get both those guys. So, I think Texas has already established a great baseline for next year's class. And they're already got some local talent as well with Yaheem Riley. So I think they're just going to add even more to that moving forward. And Xavier Griffin obviously would be right at the top of that list when it comes to best guys they've landed commits from for 2026. So we'll see how it goes. But even after his official visits, it still may be a little while until we find out exactly how he's feeling. But as of now, it looks like Texas is gonna be the biggest threat for him, as On3's Steve Wiltfong had reported. So the fact that Texas is right in the driver's seat is pretty good for the Longhorns. But you know how these things go. Somehow these recruiting battles can do a 180 at the last second. So, but yeah. I think he'd be great for Texas, and wouldn't be too surprising if Steve Sarkisian's able to land him.
Yeah, and obviously that would be a huge one, but potentially even a bigger one would come in the form of University Lab. He's technically classed as an athlete, but I've never seen. I really have not seen an athlete that plays either offensive line or defensive line. So that's pretty unique. University Lab athlete Lamar Brown. 6'3.5", 285 pounds. On3's industry ranking has him as number 8 player in the country, number 1 athlete, number 1 player in Louisiana. And the 24/7 Sports has him as ranked number 7 in the country, number 1 athlete, number 1 player in the state. ESPN has him as the unanimous number 1 player in the country, number 1 overall player, number 1 overall athlete, number 1 player in the state. He is taking an official visit to the Longhorns from June 6th to June 8th, according to Rivals.com's Sam Spiegelman. He'll also be taking visits to Miami, Texas A&M, and LSU, starting May 30th with Miami, Texas A&M on June 13th, and LSU on June 20th. Also, big shout out to my buddy John Garcia over there at Rivals.com. He'll be at the forefront of this, so if you want to go check him out as well. But right now, LSU is seen as the favorite, according to On3, for Lamar Brown. But Texas is one of those places that would be very intriguing for him. And getting, just the fact they have Kyle Flood as the offensive line coach, and he's well known for developing players and putting them in the NFL. They have Kenny Baker as a defensive line coach who just put 2 more guys in the NFL draft with Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins. And he's already shown a tremendous aptitude for developing defensive linemen and recruiting big-time guys. Justice Terry is the recent example of that. So another guy that Texas will covet, another guy that potentially, if they can land him, would be an absolutely massive addition to this 2026 class that is really starting to come together as of late. Zach, this is obviously a little bit more of a long shot than, or maybe not a long shot, but a little bit tougher of a battle than Xavier Griffin could potentially be, but it could be a big one for the Longhorns.
Yeah, and I think Matthew Golden put it best. I know it's a different position, obviously, that he plays, but before the NFL draft, he was talking to the Texas social media team, and he basically sent a message to recruits saying, if you want to go to the league, come to Texas. And I think Lamar Brown is going to go to the league no matter where he goes, but if there's any proof about what you can do as an offensive lineman or defensive lineman at Texas, you don't have to look too far. You can look at just as recently as this past draft or even last year's draft about seeing, what kind of players were going into the league from Texas at the position that he's playing. So obviously LSU had Will Campbell, offensive lineman, go number 4 to the Patriots, but I think Lamar Brown, not being a recruiting expert, I think just, off a base evaluation of him, that he's going to be probably playing defensive line. If you're just looking at someone who's an athlete of his caliber, you kind of want him rushing the passer. So I think if he chooses defensive line and he looks at what Texas can offer him when it comes to long-term NFL potential, don't look too far. You look at Alfred Collins, you look at Vernon Broughton, you look at Byron Murphy, you look at Tavondre Sweat. You look at what those guys have done over the past 2 seasons going to the league. So I think, seeing that NFL pedigree that Texas has developed on the defensive line, and if he decides to play offensive line, because the same way, you see how many offensive linemen for Texas have been drafted over the past 2 seasons. So any way he looks at it, if he's looking at Texas as a possibility, there's tons of selling points there for him. But of course, a Baton Rouge native, LSU is going to be hard to compete with for sure. So we'll see how that goes. You never know. Sometimes the hometown, potentially staying in your hometown isn't enough for some of these guys. Sometimes they want more. Sometimes they want to get out of town. I know whenever I was done with high school, I wanted to get out of my hometown. So you never know how these things go. But we'll see how it goes. And I think, like you mentioned, he'd probably be arguably an even bigger recruit than Xavier Griffin should Texas land him. So Steve Sarkisian and company, they're staying high on the recruiting trail, and it's going to be hard to stop them, that's for sure.
Yeah, and as we saw with Justice Terry last year, who was very heavily considered to be a lock for Georgia, out of the state of Georgia there, Texas came in, said the right things, probably offered the right NIL package, and they were able to pry Justice Terry out of Georgia. Maybe they can do the same thing here with Lamar Brown out of Louisiana. A little bit shorter of a distance for his family to travel as well, from Baton Rouge to Austin. But big time stuff happening on the recruiting trail for Texas. We'll be back at our next show. I'm sure we'll touch on some more. There's a lot of stuff happening. Next month, I'm going to be in Los Angeles covering Dia Bell at the Elite 11 Finals, which should be a blast. So we'll have a lot for you there when that time comes. But there's going to be a lot more happen until then. They're making up ground with guys like Dre Quinn, defensive end, Jarella McCoy, another guy on the defensive side who they're making up ground with. But we're going to call it there. We'll come back with some more stuff either later this week or next week. Our schedule is a little bit more scattered during the off season, but we'll be on when there's news to talk about. Whether that's daily or a couple times a week or whatever the case may be until football season rolls around. We'll be here with the latest big news for the Texas Longhorns. But that's going to do it for another edition of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. You can listen to us on pretty much every major podcast platform out there, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We're also live on X, Facebook, and YouTube, so you can catch us out there, or you can catch us there as well. Don't forget to check out Texas Longhorns on SI for all your latest news and notes regarding Longhorn sports. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to hit the like button and the sub button on your favorite platform. But most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them, and we will catch you next time.
We'll be back. Yes, sir.
Fight.